It's time for Good Policies, brought to you by the Barrett Insurance Agency, 748-5224, or online at thebarrettagency.com. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
That's good. It is a lovely day.
It is.
I had to plant some grass, and
See?
It's a non-watering kind of day.
Yes, it's all your perspective on stuff.
Absolutely.
Every day I have to stand out watering the garden, feeding the bugs. And any day that I don't have to stand out and feed the bugs is a good day.
It's a victory right there.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
So last week,
Yes.
let me recap for you.
Oh, wow. Well, you
Last
should have
week-
asked me if I was sitting down.
I've been taking maca and ginkgo biloba to try to improve my overall brain function.
Been spiking your juice, have you?
I have, yeah.
Good.
So last week we were talking about who is covered on home and auto policies.
Like kind of the differences. And,
Yeah, exactly. And we determined that with homes, anybody who is technically living there, whether it's a family member that you're caring for, or if they've been there long term and that they rely on that place as the roof over their head, they're covered by a home policy.
They are, and I think a little clarification is worthwhile on this, just for this purpose. So, if the house burns, they're not going to get a check cut in their name for the house because they have no insurable interest in the house.
Right.
But when it comes to personal property and liability coverage,
If they're injured, right.
not if they're injured. If they're liable for injury or bodily injury or property damage to another.
Okay.
Yes. I got cool stories about that I can tell you down the road. But.
I got stories I can tell you.
Yeah, so I mean, their interest in their own personal property is protected, and they have liability coverage of the policy.
So if your house burns and you get burned, third-degree burns.
Health insurance better be in place.
All right, so that's what covers that. All right.
Yeah, it's very important to know liability does not cover you.
If you have guests over and the house burns and they get burned.
Yes. They would have medical payments coverage because they sustained an injury on the property, and then if they wanted to be litigious and prove negligence on your part,
you gotta hate them damn litigious friends.
Everybody becomes litigious when $500,000 in liability is at stake.
Steer clear of women named litigious.
They may be pretty.
Yeah, litigious. All right. So now this week we're talking about who's covered with automobile policies.
Right, and this is very confusing, as I stated last week. I mean, insurance follows the vehicle.
Right.
All right, so people hear that go, yay! But it comes down to insurable interest, but it also is subject to company rules. So companies have requirements for underwriting that need to be properly addressed in the writing or endorsing of a policy.
So is it real different company to company? Or
Not
is it
much.
kind of standard throughout the industry?
It's fairly standard. I mean, the only real difference would be driver assignment to a vehicle. Every company might have a slight modification, but most follow the same course of, you need to rate the higher rated drivers on the vehicles in the policy. So if you're a four family household and you've got 2 youthful operators and 2 cars, mom and dad may be driving those 2 cars all the time, but guess who's getting rated on them? The 2 kids.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And you got to report them.
Right.
Because, you want to make sure that even if your kid stays up until 11 o'clock and takes the car without your knowledge, that they're covered.
And that's the big thing is that, it's we've said it, this will be the 3rd week in a row we've said it, sticker shock. I mean, it's not a cheap proposition to insure an automobile when a youthful is driving it. Now, I remember very distinctly, my dad's had the agency now for 25 years. A year after he bought the agency, I got my license.
Oh, boy.
Guess who had to go get his own car?
You're that old?
Thanks, Val. Yes. Yes, I know I may look young.
You do.
Yeah. So
it's all those sleepless nights.
It is all those sleepless nights. But so there's even no rest for the insurance agent's son. I mean, or no reprieve, I should say. I mean, it was not a cheap proposition. So I bought a liability-only vehicle and got my own policy. But that's really what led me to talk about this. Is that you really have to consider who isn't insured. So if your child owns the car in their own name.
Right.
They can't be on your policy.
Right. They can't be.
Because you have no insurable interest in the vehicle. It's their car. So now they have to insure it in their own name. And then, if they're driving your vehicles all the time and they live in your household, it's a requirement of the company. We're not going to come and police you. We can't say, hey, I'm wondering if you have a 16-year-old now. So, I mean, it's hard to catch, but if an accident occurs,
Yeah, and
and that
that's what
youthful
this-
is the reason for the accident, you could see some big spikes in premiums. So.
Yeah, and if you're not insured, you could see some incredible bills that you'll be paying on for the rest of your life.
Yeah, just don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't ever do that.
So here's the question I have for you.
Sure.
So your kid is driving down the road. He's insured. He's in his own car. He has liability only.
Right.
And he hits Stephen King. This happened to somebody in Maine, and so the liability part of that insurance would cover the injuries to Stephen King.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And
But if you're nothing's going to cover the thumps you're going to put on your son's head, right?
Right. So if your son is injured in that accident, let's hope that you have medical payments coverage on his auto policy.
Okay.
Whether it be $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. Some companies even have up to $100,000.
But like I said, this is a liability only policy.
Liability only policy, but we recommend strongly that every policy have medical payments, even though that's not required.
And you can so that would be a liability with medical payments, but it would not cover any damage to the car.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. And unless the vehicle sustained damage due to somebody else's negligence,
Right.
then it would come from their liability.
But if it's just a Stephen King dent, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. And except for have him sign it and then sell the car saying, look,
Stephen King.
I hit Stephen King right here. He signed it.
Stephen King's hip profile right here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very confusing proposition, that's for sure. In terms of who's driving, how they're driving, when they're driving, how the vehicles are covered. I mean, the policy covers the vehicle regardless of who's driving it. There are some potential exclusions, but we won't get into that because it's very, very seldom that you would see that. It would be if you're driving a car and you have your own insurance and you're borrowing a friend's car and they don't have insurance.
But we won't get into that because that's what you do when people come and sit
there
down
you go.
with you.
I can bore the bejeebers out of you face to face instead of on the radio.
All right.
How's that sound?
We'll invite folks to come and join you in your office
Hey, it's a rainy day. Why not?
with questions and advice.
But the biggest thing is if you have a youthful, if you have a permitted driver, you should report them to your agent or your
Yeah,
company.
now
But
here-
you're not going to get charged for a permitted driver.
Here's what's interesting. On my current policies, Jasper is 18 and he's permitted. He doesn't have his license yet, but he will soon. Max is 20. He's got his license.
Yep.
They're both, my insurance company is aware of both of them, but it didn't drive my rates through the ceiling because they're not full-time drivers. They just
Right.
drive occasionally.
The 20-year-old, is he living in a household?
Only during the summer. He's in college.
How
the
far
rest of
away is he off to school?
Burlington.
Okay.
2 hours away.
Yeah. So that, and when did he get his license? 3 years ago?
Yeah.
There you go. Once you've got 3 years driving experience, you see
Oh,
a
it
nice,
drops again.
See a little bit of a drop.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Right. And then if you turn 21 and you're a really responsible driver, many companies will give you great.
Yeah, but I've asked, okay, if we're going to have one of our kids drive these cars full time, and all of a sudden it goes from reasonable to completely unreasonable.
Obscene. Obscene. I've seen premiums for single vehicles for one youthful operator in upwards of $6,000 to $7,000 a year for full coverage. So consider that when little Johnny gets his license and says, I want to buy a car.
All right, that does it for this week's Good Policies, brought to you by the Barrett Insurance Agency, 7485224, online at thebarrettagency.com.
And on Facebook, Barrett Insurance Agency.
And we'll talk next week.
Have a good one.